Frightened? You think I'm likely to be frightened by a paltry thunderclap after what I've been through? It takes more than that these days to scare Charles Thompson. More wine? Now, you've got a note of the correct measurements. 18 feet deep, not an inch less. And before you say it's too much, there's a very good reason for it. You've rarely set foot outside Mansfield, I'll wager. Nigh on half a century in that safe little lawyer's office, thumbing through wills, writs and affidavits. Got no sense of adventure. I soon found Mansfield was too small for me. I was a success in the cloth trade here, but I yearned to travel. I soon learned there'd be more opportunities on the continent. Unfortunately, as I soon found out, the year 1755 wasn't a good time to arrive in Lisbon. It was just an ordinary day to start with. I was about to put the finishing touches to my latest deal with a merchant named Duarte when it happened. The very moment I picked up my pen, the ink pot shot from one end of the desk to the other. Like that. Poor old Duarte practically jumped out of his skin. I moved the ink pot back, tried again, and the same thing happened. Well, by now Duarte's crossing himself like mad and muttering something about a sign from heaven. I asked him what he meant, and he said Father Dominguez had been warning his flock for weeks that God was going to punish Lisbon for its sins. I thought, why pick on Lisbon? It's no more sinful than, say, London or even Mansfield. Still, the man's a Catholic and they're prone to these strange ideas. Anyway, we finally managed to conclude the deal and Duarte left. A few minutes later, there was the most almighty crash from the kitchen. Oh, louder than that. The whole house shook. Then Antonio, my servant, came running in, shouting, "Terremoto! Terremoto!" Now, I know what you're thinking. Foreigners, scared of their own shadows. But not Antonio. Now, I picked up enough Portuguese to know what he was going on about. Earthquake. I'll tell you, man, we were out of there in a flash. In the streets, it was chaos. People running round like headless chickens, babbling away in every tongue under the sun. I didn't understand a word, but fear doesn't need an interpreter. Thank God Antonio knew the city like the back of his hand. He grabbed me by the arm and dragged me away from the main roads through back streets and filthy alleys till we came to a churchyard. Dear God, the things I saw that night. Graves torn open, decaying bodies staring up at me with sightless eyes, skeletal hands pointing up to the heavens as if to say, Father Dominguez was right, the day of judgment is at hand. Wine? No? Well, I hope you don't mind if I do. See? Even the memory of it makes my hand shake. I couldn't get out of there fast enough. But at last we made it to a hill on the outskirts of the city. Suddenly I gripped Antonio by the arm. "The money!" I cried. "In the chest!" I'd better explain. I kept certain monies, about £7,000 belonging to shareholders and investors, in a chest in the cellar. Now, if it had been my own money, I'd have left it. But I was a respected cloth merchant with a reputation for honesty and integrity. I had a duty to those people. However, by now, most of the city had been reduced to rubble, my own house included, no doubt. So Antonio prevailed upon me to sleep, and we'd see what the morrow would bring. Sleep? Oh, how could I? Every time I closed my eyes, there they were, those ghastly corpses, and their hands were pointing at me now, as though I'd summoned them out of the ground. Dawn came. I looked round for Antonio. No sign of him. The house, of course. He'd have gone back to the house. I raced back through what remained of the city like a madman, taking good care to steer well clear of the graveyard. At last, I found the pile of rubble that had once been my house. Surely my quest was futile. I tore at the timber and masonry like a man possessed, all the while calling out, "Antonio!" Not a sound. At last I made enough of a gap to squeeze through. A beam was wedged against the cellar door, but at least the door was still intact, so chances were that the cellar was too. In the pitch blackness, I groped my way down the steps. As I did so, I kept shouting, "Antonio!" Silence. I found a candle and tinderbox I kept down there and produced enough light to be able to make out one or two objects. The chest there, it was! It was safe! Then, joy of joys, I heard it. It was scarcely audible at first, and I thought my ears were deceiving me. Then it came more clearly. "Senor!" "Antonio?" I moved in the direction of the voice, and there he was, lying in a corner, utterly exhausted. "I got into the house and down here with no trouble," he whispered, "but I couldn't get out." Clearly that had been when the beam had crashed down, wedging the door shut. I hoisted his limp frame onto one shoulder, picked up the chest with my free hand, and carried both of my burdens to safety. It's nearly 30 years ago, but I still see those rotten corpses. Smell them even. That's why I insist it be 18 feet deep. No earthquake's going to evict me from my final resting place.